Welcome to a introductory lecture where I am going to go over some basic kind of underlying or guiding principles that we'll be learning about or that are important to know in order to kind of ground us in this class, which is all about providing guidance for behaviors. And specifically in this class, we'll typically refer to behaviors as positive behaviors or challenging behaviors. And many students, when they enter into this class, their primary focus is challenging behaviors, typically ones that are inappropriate or are disruptive, or even can be harmful or dangerous to the child, other children, families, adults, staff, faculty, teachers, that type of stuff. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen with a PowerPoint where I'm going to kind of go over these topics. All right, so kind of I think one of the bigger things to kind of start with, we typically in the United States, kind of our method of working with child guidance is to motivate children towards self-control and self-discipline. We're a fairly independently minded country, or kind of education within the United States and public education specifically, public schools or kind of childcare in the United States are typically towards having children feel that they can be in charge of their own selves and their own discipline, in order to kind of be healthy and happy within kind of our society, which is typically less kind of collaborative, less collectivist, and more kind of centered on the individual or maybe the individual family, but specifically kind of focusing on, we often want children to be able to discipline themselves and control themselves and have a lot of impulse control as they get older, because we kind of believe that that allows for children to be making their own kind of decisions and having their own responsibilities over themselves. Typically with guidance, what we're looking for is to control or to change a child's behavior. And by behavior, I mean their actions, their thoughts, the words that they say, and any kind of actions that they do. And a lot of times, like I said before, we even either view it as positive or kind of challenging. And typically if it's challenging, it's disruptive, or kind of harmful or hurtful, or inappropriate or dangerous. And so when it's those types of things, we typically want to change it, and we typically want to motivate the child to change that behavior. One of kind of the big grounding principles is developmentally appropriate practice. And if you've taken any kind of child development classes before, you're very well of this. And all this really is that you understand what an age group should act, how they should act, what they should do, what actions they should be able to take, how they should be able to speak, how they should be able to talk, interact, have emotions, not have emotions. You're kind of very aware of that, and you are able to put that into practice with a child or a group of children. So that kind of means that you know that a 2-year-old is very different than a 12-year-old. This is very different than a 22-year-old, and I can keep going until 102, right? At each part of our lifespan, we are acting in different ways, and we are developing in special ways as well, right? So like a baby is learning how to crawl and talk, whereas a teenager is kind of trying to develop their own identity. So developmentally, at each stage in our life, we're acting in different ways. That also means that we also need to be aware of children with special needs whose abilities might be different and not be within kind of the typical way in which we view lifespan or the developmental stages that we have as well. So we need to kind of be aware of that when we're thinking of developmentally appropriate practice. Also, children have different linguistic abilities. So we might have children who are English as second language learners, or maybe even learning a third language, something like that. So they're bilingual or trilingual, and so they are going to be developmentally learning maybe 2 languages at the same time, or they already have 1 language and they're adding another one, and their behavior is going to be different. Their verbal ability is going to be different. Their receptive ability, what they can hear and understand, will be different. And then many different cultures also have ways in which they view development as well, and they might prioritize one form of development over the other. And so I've given you a couple of examples about like you're gonna in an infant room you would give a baby a teething rattle, but you'd give a puzzle to a toddler, right? Those are developmentally different materials that we provide for kids. A teacher might say it's nice to share your toy with a kindergarten, but we wouldn't necessarily expect toddlers to share that much. We probably have lots and lots of toys within an environment because they're not known for their sharing, right? They're very egocentric. It's all about them. They really don't have the ability to kind of understand other people's perspectives. So we don't necessarily expect great sharing out of a toddler. Or a that's why we kind of often call it the terrible twos. A teenager might go to the mall with friends and has to be home at 11, but a 15-year-old might get dropped off and picked up by their parents, right? Because they can't drive, they don't have that. They also might not have the ability at 15 to get home safely or even kind of be able to exist within a curfew, but a 16 or 17-year-old probably will. A big thing in this class that I kind of want to push back on is this idea of a spoiled baby. And I think this comes out of this view that children are good or bad, or easy or hard, or challenging or laid back, or feisty versus flexible, which is a temperament that we learn about. But I think that sometimes this can create this idea that one is good and the other is bad. That a child is spoiled or they're not. That they were an easy baby or they were a bad baby. And even sometimes when we talk about guidance, we talk about positive or we talk about challenging, but we don't necessarily want to put like a moral take on that. Just because a child is exhibiting challenging behaviors does not mean that the child is challenging, right? It's just that in this moment, for whatever reason, for a trauma or an abuse in their background, or the speech delay that they have, or that they just moved, or a little sister was born, something like that, they are in this moment exhibiting challenging behaviors with that, and we are attempting to guide them back into more positive ways that they can act and behave and have actions. So we don't necessarily want to view a child's behavior as like their personality, right? Like their entire personality is not that they're spoiled. Their entire personality is not that they're a challenging person, something like that. They are a person who maybe is exhibiting that is, or maybe is acting more difficult, or you are being challenged by them, but that does not mean that the child themselves is. And I would say that even it might also relate to many adults in our world as well. So like your coworkers and stuff like that, you might have a personality conflict with them, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad person. It means that you guys need to work on the communication and the boundaries, the steps that you need to take and to have a nice professional relationship, but that doesn't mean that either one of you is necessarily a bad person. We also want to talk about I also want to talk about kind of some of the rights that children have, that we kind of believe that they should have in childcare, in education, and then like at home and in the community as well. And then also like in the next slide, some responsibilities that we want children to work towards, because like a baby's not going to have responsibilities, but a teenager could. So a child has a right to their feelings. So absolutely, you are allowed to feel what you feel. And with little kids, we are helping them to identify what that feeling is. We're helping them to be able to express that and then also to regulate those feelings. And that's really hard, especially for much younger children. Part of developmentally appropriate practice, we're understanding that can be more challenging. We also, I do want to have a disclaimer. We all are entitled to our feelings, right? And to feel those feelings, but you do not have the right to act on those feelings in inappropriate, dangerous, or disruptive ways. And that's what we're trying to kind of teach children. So you are really, really upset right now as a 3-year-old who does not have the blue truck that you want to have. You are allowed to feel frustrated, angry. We can help you identify what that feeling is. But you are not allowed to pick up the red truck and smack your friend in the face, right, in order to get the blue truck back. That is a common thing that we might see, but we are helping children understand that your reactions and your behaviors that are not always valid or appropriate or going to be accepted by everyone. And so instead we want that to help to focus on identifying the feelings, feeling the feelings, and then regulating yourself so that you are acting in an appropriate way when you are having those feelings. Because that's really going to serve you as you get older, right? So if you're still feeling upset and angry and frustrated as an adult, when you are asked to share, you cannot go and smack somebody in the face because they got in line first at the bank, right? You have to like feel frustrated that now it's going to be more, it's going to be a little bit more time. I'm going to be late back to work. And I'm really frustrated that this person is in front of me, but I'm not going to shove them or yell at them or something like that. I'm going to wait my turn. I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to attempt to regulate myself. And then when I get home, I'm going to tell my spouse, I was late back from my lunch break today because, somebody cut in line at me at the bank or something like that. Another kind of right that we think that children specifically should have, and I would say that we want everybody to be safe, but as adults, we are the responsible person who is an adult who is trying to make the child safe. So in childcare and education, and then at home as well, we would like to keep children safe, physically safe, right? Like by doing childproofing and making sure that we have appropriate materials and all of those things, but also emotionally safe so that they can have their feelings and somebody's helping you kind of try to work through those feelings as well. And then also I think it's important, especially in education or when we're parenting, that a child can have a like and dislike. Right? Like there are certain foods that I like and my husband's not like, oh, why do you hate mustard? Right? He's just like, oh, here's your hot dog with just ketchup on it. Right? So I'm allowed to have this like and dislike. Yes, we want to encourage kids to try new things, but at the end of the day, sometimes we just have likes and dislikes. And for the most part, we can kind of respect that because we all have wants and needs, and kind of part of being safe is that people aren't forcing you to really do something that you really, really hate to do. And this is in low stakes situations, right? Because sometimes a toddler is like, I don't want to get a diaper change, right? And there are tips and techniques that we can do to make a child feel more comfortable or have, or just kind of help them get through the process, because you can't, a toddler can want to choose to stay in a stinky diaper. And as an adult, we have to be like, nah, that's okay. You're not going to stay in the stinky diaper, but we will talk them through the process, and we will have tips and tricks and little techniques in order to help them kind of get through this process. But if it's low stakes things like they want to wear that yellow shirt today, or they want to not have mustard on their hot dog, those are the things that we can kind of respect, even about a younger child who's still learning and developing. And then children's responsibilities. We are striving that as children age, they will take over more responsibility to keep themselves healthy, to keep their bodies safe, to be respectful, and to be responsible. So once again, developmentally appropriate practice. We are helping younger children with this, and as we age and get towards teenagers and our early 20s, we're taking over more and more responsibilities. So it might be like an inverted pyramid. At the very bottom of the pyramid, you have the child who needs a lot of help and a lot of support because they're an infant and toddler. And then as we go more, the teenager and the person in their early 20s is taking on a lot more of that responsibility in their own life. So we want children to be healthy. We want them to make healthy decisions for their body. And this might be like diet and exercise and things like that. That also might be the ability to feel and identify and regulate their own emotions. We want them to make safe decisions for their bodies as well, and how they interact with the world. And then we also want to raise them in safe communities where they can see this kind of modeled. One of the biggest ways to have a respectful and responsible child is to model this in our families, our communities, and then also in education as well. So we respect children in developmentally appropriate ways, and we model that for them. And then when they are not being respectful, we point that out. And sometimes we have boundaries and consequences as well. Same with being responsible as well. So if a child's not doing something that we think that they should be able to do, then we can point that out to them. We can give them a boundary or a consequence so that they can learn what that behavior is that is expected for them in school. The more that we do this in younger ages, the more that this will help them in higher stakes educational situations like middle school, junior high, and high school, right? Where there can be like suspensions and expulsions and like having to go to different schools and things like that. So the more that we help children by providing boundaries and consequences for behaviors that are challenging, are disruptive, or inappropriate, the more that that helps children learn what to do and what not to do, and that's going to serve them throughout that lifespan as they grow and develop. So these were just some kind of key concepts that I thought were important for you all to understand as we go further in this child guidance class. Once again, it is an online class, so if you have questions about any of these kind of key principles or any course content, please just always email me. It is a summer class, but I check my emails in the morning and then in the afternoons, typically around like 3-ish, 4-ish, and please expect 24 business hours for me to get a response back to you, but I am always looking for good emails so I can help you learn more about child development. All right, thank you so much, and I will see you guys more online.